morning. Welcome to another Throwing Shade. So, last week or every week for about the last 4 or 5 years, I've worked with a group of young men who are at risk, essentially. They're really amazing, high-achieving young men, but are in situations or live in a circumstance where they're at-risk young people. So I'm having a conversation with them about how they can best navigate their lives. They've got just a number of things that are working against them, even though they are, and each of them by nature, really well-mannered, articulate, bright young men, but nevertheless in a system that is somewhat unforgiving. And so the advice I gave them was twofold. First, I told them they need to exploit their academic opportunities, that one of the things that will help even the playing field for them is a high achievement academically, to do as best as they can to get some advanced degree or find themselves in a place where they have taken the tools they've been given academically and exploited them and used them to better their lives. The second thing I told them, though, is more important, and that's really what the Throwing Shade is about this morning. The second thing I've told them is that they need to understand and be aware of their surroundings. Understand and be aware of their surroundings. In the course of this conversation, I had told them at that time, erroneously, that there were only 60 groups of white nationalist, racist organizations in the United States. I was off by about 390,000. There are actually 450 white nationalist or racist organizations in the United States of America. So the reason that I told them that they need to be high achievers and that they need to be aware of their circumstance is that they never know when they're going to meet their racist. There have been numerous studies done to try to quantify the actual number of people in the country who tend to have racist tendencies. The most recent figures find, and in my life experience has reflected, that about 70% of white Americans, European Americans in the country are good, embracing, inclusive people who really don't have issues with anyone who looks different or speaks differently. And 70% seems like a good number, but that actually means that 1 in 3 of white European Americans that my young men will encounter will have either had some engagement or have flirted with the idea of white supremacy or racism. It isn't always overt, but it can be latent and nevertheless detrimental for a young man who is navigating his life, but on that particular day and in that particular occasion meets his racist. Let us say that he's applying for a job and he's got credentials that are equal to all the other people who are trying to get that same position, but on that day he meets his racist, the person who is in the position to make a decision about what happens in his life. Nothing that he has done, but nevertheless he's been a victim of that circumstance. 1 in 3 is a large number. Here's the other problem that I had alluded to them last year. Now, there's someone who also has a podcast, Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a very well-known commentator, Fox News, Breitbart. She's, I want to say, unique in that she's African American, but she's a bit of an enigma in that she's African American. Now, understand, Candace does not black identify. In other words, she looks like us, but does not identify with us culturally or in any substantive fashion. So she had been telling her viewers that there were only 9 instances of race motivated or had an incident of racial violence from the police, when in actuality the number is 1,000. There were 1,000 instances where police fatally shot people of color. That's bad enough. But here is what makes it even, this kind of gives it some context. Last week there was an insurrection at the Capitol. Now we know that the people that organized that particular insurrection were predominantly from white nationalist organizations, whether it was Proud Boys or Oath Keepers or neo-Nazis, and we know this because they carried their insignia with them. The other disturbing fact about the insurrection was not just that there were so many, but they discovered that about 20% of the people that were in that group that were arrested were police officers, military, which means that if there is that much of an infusion of white nationalism, if you extrapolate that number into the general population of police officers, essentially every time you're stopped by the police as an African American male, there's about a 1 in 5 chance that is where you will meet your racist. So what do we do? You know, one of the things that's most important is that we educate ourselves, that we understand our circumstances. And as I've told those young men, you've got to know your environment. You really do. Second is you've really got to be over-prepared. It is critical for Black Americans, for young Black people, grown-up Black folks, all of us, that we are so aware of our circumstance that we act in a way that does not allow for provocation, so that anyone who might have these latent tendencies is given a reason to act on them. The other thing is we need to engage ourselves in educating the part of our population that don't get it. I mean, oftentimes when you mention race-based anger or race-based opportunity, there is a portion of the population that shuts down. They call it the race card and they don't want to hear it. This is our reality. It's not made up. It's not a projection. It is not an artificial existence. This is what our statistical reality is. We can't fix it unless we all know about it. Half of the work of solving the problem is admitting you have one. But what do I know? I'm just throwing shade. Thanks for being with me this morning. I look forward to seeing you later on this week.